John and Emily, a young couple from Boston, are tired of city life and the constant noise and stress that surrounds them. They stumble upon a listing for an old, abandoned lighthouse perched on a cliff along the rugged coast of Maine. The lighthouse is isolated, with nothing but the sound of waves crashing against the rocks below, and the couple immediately feels drawn to it. They see it as the perfect escape, a place where they can start fresh and live a quiet, peaceful life. Upon arrival, the structure impresses them with its historic charm. The white paint is chipped and weathered, the spiral staircase creaks under their feet, and the lighthouse lens, though dusty, still gleams faintly when sunlight hits it. The air smells of salt and seaweed, and the wind carries a chill that hints at the lighthouse's long, lonely history. As they explore, they find remnants of the previous keeper's life. Old tools, faded photographs, and a logbook filled with entries that abruptly stop years ago. By day, the place feels almost magical. Seagulls circle above, and the ocean stretches endlessly into the horizon. John and Emily spend hours walking along the cliff, imagining how peaceful life here could be. They talk about renovating the interior, painting the walls, and hosting small gatherings for the few visitors who might ever make it to such a remote location. But as night falls, an unsettling atmosphere begins to emerge. Shadows stretch unnaturally across the walls, and the sound of the waves seems louder, almost like whispers carried on the wind. Emily, standing on the balcony and looking at the dark, rolling sea, feels a strange sensation, as if the ocean itself is watching them. John brushes it off his nerves, but deep down, he too feels a shiver that runs along his spine. The first night in the lighthouse ends with a mixture of excitement and unease, leaving the couple with a lingering sense that their dream escape might hold secrets far darker than they could ever imagine. The night after settling into the lighthouse, Emily finds herself unable to sleep. Drawn by a strange pull, she steps out onto the balcony and gazes at the endless expanse of the dark ocean. The waves crash rhythmically against the cliffside, but beneath the sound of the surf, she begins to hear something else, faint, melodic whispers carried on the wind. At first, she thinks it is her imagination, a trick of the mind after a long day of unpacking and exploration. As she focuses, the whispers seem to form words, almost calling her by name. Emily shivers and glances back at the cozy interior of the lighthouse, where John sleeps unaware. Her curiosity overpowers her fear, and she leans farther over the railing, trying to locate the source. The ocean glimmers faintly, and she sees a small, flickering light far off the horizon, moving rhythmically, almost as if beckoning her to come closer. Emily calls to John, but her voice seems swallowed by the wind. When he finally steps outside, he notices her tense expression and the strange intensity in her eyes. Emily describes the whispers and the flickering light, but John laughs it off, attributing it to nerves and the eerie isolation of their new home. Yet, as he peers toward the horizon, he can't help but feel a subtle unease himself, a sense that the sea is alive in a way he cannot explain. Over the next few nights, the whispers grow more distinct, and Emily begins dreaming about the ocean in vivid, almost prophetic detail. She sees shapes beneath the waves, shadowy figures that seem to be observing them, moving in harmony with the flickering light. Each dream leaves her waking in a cold sweat, a lingering fear that something is waiting, just beyond the cliff's edge, watching and waiting for the perfect moment. By the end of the second night, the couple realizes that the lighthouse is far more than a scenic retreat. The sea, beautiful and seemingly serene during the day, hides an unknown intelligence, and the boundary be. A few days after moving in, John decides to explore the storage room of the lighthouse, a dusty, cobweb-filled space he had barely glanced at before. Among the old crates and rusted tools, he discovers a leather-bound diary, its pages yellowed with age. Curious, he wipes off the thick layer of dust and begins to read. The handwriting is jagged but deliberate, belonging to the previous lighthouse keeper, a man named Thomas Harrow, who mysteriously vanished decades ago. The diary entries start innocuously, describing the daily routines of maintaining the lighthouse and observing the ocean. But as John reads on, the tone shifts. Thomas writes about strange lights appearing on the horizon at night, whispering voices that call to him, and shadows moving just beyond the cliffside. His entries grow increasingly erratic, warning that the lighthouse itself is a beacon, not just for ships, but for something ancient that lives beneath the waves. One entry catches John's attention. Thomas speaks of a night when the light of the lighthouse seemed to pulse in rhythm with the waves, as if communicating with the entities lurking in the depths. He writes that he tried to leave, but every path out of the lighthouse seemed to vanish, and the fog rose thicker than any natural storm. The last few pages of the diary are filled with frantic scrawls, a desperate plea for someone not to follow in his footsteps, ending abruptly with the words, "They are patient. They wait. Do not shine the light." John closes the diary slowly, his hands trembling. Emily enters the room, curious about what he has found. He shares the diary's contents with her, and together they realize that the lighthouse is not just an abandoned tower by the sea. It is a conduit to something far older and far more dangerous. The whispers Emily has heard and the flickering lights on the horizon now make terrifying sense. They are signs of a presence that has been waiting for centuries, using the lighthouse as a gateway between. A few nights after discovering the old diary, John and Emily begin to notice that the lighthouse behaves strangely in ways that cannot be explained. Doors creak and open on their own, even when tightly latched, and shadows seem to crawl along the walls with a life of their own. At first, they convince themselves it is just the wind or the natural settling of an old building, but the occurrences grow increasingly disturbing. One evening, Emily is in the kitchen preparing a simple dinner when she hears the sound of footsteps echoing from the spiral staircase. She calls for John, but he does not respond. As she slowly ascends the stairs, the air grows colder, and a chilling draft sweeps past her, though all windows are closed. At the top, she finds the staircase empty, but the shadows on the walls stretch unnaturally, twisting into shapes that resemble human figures. Panic rises in her chest, and she rushes back down to find John waiting calmly, pretending nothing has happened. Over the next few days, the couple experiences more unnerving phenomena. Objects shift positions inexplicably, lights flicker even when unplugged, and the lighthouse's ancient lens casts strange, pulsating reflections across the interior walls. Emily starts hearing whispers in the dead of night, faint voices that seem to echo from the corners of the rooms, calling out names that are not hers or John's. The couple realizes that the lighthouse is more than just a building. It seems to respond to their presence, almost as if it is aware of them. One particularly unsettling night, as a storm approaches the coast, John and Emily witness shadows moving along the cliffside outside, separate from any natural forms. They appear to rise from the ocean itself, crawling toward the lighthouse, as if drawn by its beam. The couple huddles together, fear tightening around them like a vice. For the first time, they fully comprehend that the isolation they sought has made them vulnerable, and that the lighthouse. A week after experiencing the unexplained events, John and Emily notice a change in the weather unlike anything they have seen before. Thick, unnatural fog rolls in from the ocean, swallowing the lighthouse and the cliffs below. The normally visible horizon disappears completely, leaving the couple disoriented and isolated. The fog carries an eerie stillness, broken only by the sound of distant waves and what seems like faint, whispering voices hidden within its depths. That evening, Emily stands on the balcony, peering into the dense gray haze. A sense of being watched creeps over her. Through the fog, she catches glimpses of shadowy figures moving in unnatural patterns, rising from the ocean's edge and gliding toward the lighthouse as if drawn to its light. Her heart races, and she calls for John, who is in the kitchen. When he joins her, he squints into the gray, unable to make out the shapes clearly, but feeling the growing weight of unease himself. Inside the lighthouse, the atmosphere is tense and suffocating. The wind howls through cracks in the walls, yet somehow the temperature remains unnaturally cold. Objects begin to shift more violently than before. Chairs scrape across the floor, doors slam without contact, and the shadows cast by the lanterns appear to move independently of any light source. Emily senses a presence lurking just beyond the walls, patient and deliberate, observing their every move. As the fog thickens, the whispers grow louder and more coherent. They seem to call John and Emily by name, inviting or warning them to step closer to the edge of the cliff. Panic sets in as the couple realizes that the lighthouse is no longer merely a home or a retreat. It has become a beacon for something ancient and powerful, something waiting beneath the waves. By the end of the night, John and Emily are exhausted and terrified, knowing that the fog has not only obscured their surroundings, but also brought them closer to a reality they cannot control. The morning after the foggy night, John and Emily visit the small nearby town to gather supplies. They decide to speak with the locals, hoping to find someone who can explain the strange occurrences at the lighthouse. An elderly man named Mr. Hawthorne, a retired fisherman, listens carefully as the couple recounts the nights filled with shadows, whispers, and the ever-present fog. He stares at them gravely and warns, "You should not be here. The lighthouse has a history few dare to speak of." Curious and desperate for answers, John presses him further. Mr. Hawthorne reluctantly explains that the previous keeper, Thomas Harrow, vanished under mysterious circumstances decades ago. Harrow had observed unusual lights at sea, heard voices calling his name, and recorded in his diary that the lighthouse beam seemed to awaken something ancient and dangerous beneath the water. The entities, Mr. Hawthorne says, are patient and powerful. They can manipulate reality, the fog, and even human perception to lure victims toward the sea. The elderly man warns that the lighthouse is a gateway, a threshold connecting the human world to a hidden dimension deep within the ocean. He tells them that the previous keeper's disappearance was no accident. Harrow had attempted to resist the entity's pull, but ultimately failed. Mr. Hawthorne emphasizes that the lighthouse responds to its inhabitants, particularly those who underestimate the forces at play. "Do not shine the light more than you must," he warns, "or it will call them to you." John and Emily return to the lighthouse with a newfound understanding of the danger they face. The whispers and shadows that once seemed random now make terrifying sense. The entities are aware of them, observing and testing their resolve. The couple realizes that their presence is no coincidence. They have stepped into a carefully constructed trap where the boundaries of reality are fragile. By the evening, the lighthouse no longer feels like a home. That night, a sense of foreboding hangs heavier in the lighthouse than ever before. Thick fog has returned from the sea, creeping along the cliffs and obscuring everything beyond a few feet. John and Emily feel the oppressive weight of the lighthouse closing in around them. Shadows move along the walls as if they have a life of their own, and the whispers from the previous nights grow sharper, almost commanding. While trying to secure the doors and windows, the couple realizes that leaving the lighthouse is no longer simple. The fog seems to shift and warp the landscape, erasing familiar paths and making the surrounding cliffs look unfamiliar. Every attempt to step outside brings disorientation. The sea looks closer, yet impossibly distant, and the cliff edges seem to stretch unnaturally. The lighthouse has become a trap, its very structure manipulated by the unseen entities that now move openly in the fog. From the corners of the lighthouse, dark silhouettes emerge, gliding silently toward John and Emily. They are neither fully human nor fully sea creatures, forms that shimmer and twist like living shadows. Their whispers call the couple by name, beckoning them to the cliff's edge. John tries to reason with Emily, but even his voice is drowned by the sound of waves, the wind, and the entity's ethereal voices. Inside, objects begin to move violently. Chairs topple, lanterns swing, and shadows detach from the walls to stretch across the floors. The couple realizes that the entities are not only physical. They can manipulate the environment to disorient, scare, and eventually lure humans into their grasp. Panic sets in as Emily finds herself separated from John for a brief moment, surrounded by fog and shadows. She senses that the entities feed on fear, testing their resolve and patience. The couple clings to one another, understanding that survival depends on staying calm and not succumbing to the terror the lighthouse itself projects. By dawn, they have avoided. As the fog thickens and the shadowy entities grow bolder, John and Emily realize that the danger is escalating beyond anything they have faced before. The lighthouse is no longer just a home or a trap. It has become a sentient prison, aware of their every movement. The whispers grow more insistent, calling out to them with urgency, and the shadows at the edges of their vision begin to take on more tangible, threatening forms. One night, the entities make their most aggressive move yet. Shapes emerge from the dense fog, climbing the cliffside and moving toward the lighthouse in waves, almost like a tide of darkness. The couple is cornered, trapped inside the tower, with no escape in sight. Jean realizes that the only way to save Emily is to confront the entities directly, to offer himself as a diversion, and to draw them away from her. Jean explains his plan to Emily, whose eyes widen in terror, but she sees the resolve in his face. With heavy hearts, they prepare for the inevitable confrontation. Jean steps outside into the fog, letting the entities sense his presence. The shadows swirl and surge toward him, their whispers merging into a cacophony of sound that chills Emily to the bone. She watches in horror as John moves closer to the cliff's edge, drawing the entity's attention and giving her a chance to hide inside the lighthouse. As John faces the darkness, Emily prays silently, hoping that his sacrifice will be enough. The entities pull him closer, and for a brief moment, his figure disappears into the swirling fog. Inside, Emily listens as the sounds of struggle fade, replaced by an eerie silence. She is now alone, shaken but alive, and painfully aware that the lighthouse has claimed a part of her life forever. By the next morning, the fog has receded, but the memory of John's sacrifice lingers in every shadow and whisper. Emily understands that the entities are patient, they do not forget, and they are still watching. The lighthouse remains alive, a sun. Months have passed since John's sacrifice, and Emily has learned to live in the lighthouse, though every day is colored by fear and the constant presence of the unknown. The building feels alive in ways she cannot explain. The walls seem to shift subtly, shadows stretch and twist unnaturally, and the faint whispers occasionally return, reminding her that the entities are still near. Though she has survived, she cannot escape the feeling that the lighthouse has claimed a part of her soul. One evening, Emily notices the beam of the lighthouse flickering. It is subtle at first, almost like a malfunction, but she quickly realizes that the light is responding to the entities again. The shadows in the corners of her vision grow darker, and the whispering intensifies, forming coherent words that seem to warn her of approaching danger. She understands that the entities are patient, biding their time and waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. The isolation of the lighthouse amplifies her unease. There is no one to warn, no way to flee. The cliffs and the ever-present fog make the building both a sanctuary and a prison. Emily begins to notice changes in the environment. Objects shift without explanation, footsteps echo in empty rooms, and the ocean itself seems alive, moving with a rhythm that matches the light. The previous warnings of Mr. Hawthorne and Thomas Harrow now take on an urgent reality. The lighthouse is not just a structure. It is a sentient threshold, and she is tethered to it. Determined to survive, Emily studies the diary and notes from John's earlier experiences, learning to anticipate the entity's movements and intentions. She understands that the threats are not immediate but persistent. Every shadow, every whisper, and every flicker of the lighthouse's beam is a test, a reminder that the ancient forces beneath the ocean are aware of her presence and are waiting. By the end of this chapter, Emily knows the harsh truth, surviving John's sacrifice. Only the beginning. The entities remain vigilant, patient, and cunning, and the lighthouse continues to be a conduit between worlds. She realizes that living in this place requires constant vigilance, cleverness, and a willingness to confront the unknown, because the lingering threat is always there, just beyond the fog and the waves. As months turn into a year, Emily has grown accustomed to the eerie rhythm of life in the lighthouse, though she remains haunted by the memories of John's sacrifice. She has learned to anticipate the movements of the shadows, the patterns of the whispers, and the subtle shifts in the fog that cloak the cliffs. Yet, the sense of foreboding never leaves her. The lighthouse is alive, and its awareness is constant, watching, waiting. One stormy night, Emily sees a flicker of movement along the cliffs. A new light appears on the horizon, a boat approaching from the sea. Her heart races. She watches as a young couple arrives, braving the treacherous cliffs to reach the lighthouse. Their arrival is coincidental, or so it seems, but Emily knows better. The lighthouse draws those who step too close, and she realizes that the cycle is far from over. The new couple enters, marveling at the historic structure, unaware of the dangers that lurk. Emily observes them from the shadows, her fear mingled with dread. She understands now that the lighthouse has claimed John and will claim others if the pattern continues. The entities beneath the ocean remain patient, their whispers now directed subtly toward the newcomers, guiding them toward the beam's influence. Inside, Emily notices that the light of the lighthouse pulses faintly, as if communicating with forces beyond the natural world. She sees the shadows of John and other lost souls moving along the walls, trapped, yet watching, awaiting new victims. The realization hits her with crushing weight. The lighthouse is a gateway, and the ancient, malevolent beings it summons are eternal in their patience. Despite surviving thus far, Emily is no longer simply a resident. She has become a guardian of sorts, forced to witness the lighthouse's relentless draw. As the new couple explores, she knows she cannot intervene without risking herself. The cycle of the lighthouse will continue, and the entities will claim what they are owed. The story closes on a chilling note. The light pulses again, the fog rolls in, and the ocean whispers. The lighthouse, eternal and sentient, waits for its next souls, while Emily remains trapped within its walls, a silent witness to the dark, unending ritual. The cycle will repeat, and the lurking terror beneath the waves is far from finished. If you thought you could escape its gaze, think again. Some doors, some lights, are not meant to be opened, and those who step inside may never return. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story and want more spine-chilling horror tales, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Share your thoughts in the comments. And remember, some lights are better left untouched. The screen slowly fades to black. The faint foghorn of the lighthouse echoes, ending with subscribe and watch more buttons.